Thanks for staying tuned. I'm Stanford Howard with this edition of the HGP Sportscast. We begin with football. On Wednesday, GFF and Pili alumni launched the Frank Watson National Under-15 Association Club Tournament at GFF headquarters. Find out more in this report. The Guyana Football Federation, in collaboration with the Pili alumni, will host the National Under-15 Inter-Association Club Tournament from the 2nd to the 16th of February. There will be 9 teams from the region member association participating in a cluster format, along with a team from Region 1. Representative of the Frank Watson alumni, John Yates, gave a brief account in remembrance of Frank Watson and why it is important to have a tournament of this nature.
Frank was interested in football, and he got the young people together there and worked on discipline with the young people, eventually forming Pele Football Club and became its first president. Frank insisted that to be part of the club, you had to attend school. Important that education was part of your overall development. And I felt that it is important that we try to develop football across the 10 regions in Guyana. Guyana is not Georgetown. Guyana has 10 regions, and hence they met with the GFF and felt it important that we have some competition across our 10 regions. This is what the Pele Alumni GFF competition is about.
Youth Development Officer Brian Joseph is elated with the relationship that the GFF built with the Pele alumni to run off the tournament.
The Pele alumni, and for the very first time we were able to execute a program of this nature, and we're happy that our relationship, the partnership is a multi-year partnership. So later in the month of February we will start the 2nd edition of the Frank Watson Nationwide. It will be the Frank Watson Inter-Association that will conclude with a nationwide playoff.
Technical Director Ian Green would share some insight into what the tournament is doing in terms of the development of football in Guyana.
We're looking for our young players, by the time that they reach senior international football, that they have participated in 10,000 hours of deliberate practice. Those hours are then split between training and the playing environment. But this can only happen if we have games. So if we work backwards, we're looking at players realistically to become elite performers should be looking at doing 20 hours a week split across training with the clubs, playing games, playing with the school, the individual work that they do. But this can only happen if we have games. So it just shows that how important it is to have inter-association games.
He also added that with this edition of the tournament, the competition department has overcome a lot of challenges to make the tournament a success.
This weekend, it's a great opportunity for the first cluster and over the next few playing days that we have all the top under 15 players in the country participating at an ideal surface. So what will happen, as Brian's explained, that they'll be playing in the clusters, working through into the final stages. But ultimately, from a GFF point of view, we're looking at, again, talent ID. So we're looking at ensuring that we have identified the top players across the country that can come into our national team programs. So there'll be technical officers observing the games, ensuring that we have got the correct players moving into the academy structures.
For the HGP Sport, I am Stanford Howard. The National Sports Commission, in collaboration with the Ministry of Social Cohesion, is currently at work to ensure that the aquatic center at Liliendal is fully prepared for competition. Samuel Gillis has more in this report.
Back in 2011, the country's first Olympic-sized swimming pool at Liliendal, East Coast, Demerara, was commissioned. Back then, it was dubbed the National Aquatic Center. But according to Minister Norton, it can now be labeled the Aquatic Center since it is cracking up in many areas. Director of Sports Christopher Jones said that he was approached by various clubs to install facilities to ensure that night swims are possible. But repairs is the first item on the agenda. Safety first.
There are actually holes that actually open up on the deck And these are now, my staff there, they tried throwing sand and rocks inside. It goes so far down, we don't know where it's going. And we still notice that the entire building continues to shift. Every month, not exaggerating, every month we replace tiles because the building continues to crack. The building continues to shift. And I mentioned these holes that are opening up.
The director said the Sports Commission is seeking guidance from public infrastructure engineers as to how they can resolve the issue at the center. And based on their recommendations, a request will be made for funding in the 2020 budget to properly deal with the scope of work that has to be done at the facility.
Aquatic center. So currently, and even now, we warn many of the clubs and the young people that use there to take every precaution around. We've had to somewhat abandon the male washroom because you use the washroom for bathing. The water doesn't go through the drain hole, but it rather comes up on the tiled floors. So that room, so a lot of problems at the aquatic center. But as I mentioned, it is the initial build that was done, poorly constructed.
For Hgp Sports, I am Samuel Gillis.
Thank you, Samuel. The Guyana Jaguars has released the names of their squad to take on the Red Force in the 6th round of the PCL Regional 4-Day Tournament. The Guyana Jaguars would face Trinidad and Tobago Red Force on Thursday, the 31st of January at the Queen's Park Oval in Trinidad. The Jaguars, who lost their 5th round match, still remains on top of the leaderboard on 85.6 points, as Hurricanes in 2nd place with 59.8 points, and Scorpions at the bottom of the leaderboard with 32.6 points. The full squad reads: Tanjanarang Chanjapal Hemraj, Raymond Reefer, Leon Johnson, Vishal Singh, Anthony Bramble, Christopher Barnwell, Romario Shepard, Versami Parmal, Goodish Moti, Kimo Paul, Chevron Rutherford, Clinton Pestano. The now well-performing West Indies team is set to face off with New Zealand in the usual exciting Men's T20 World Cup in Australia.
Fans are waiting and tickets are booking for the highly anticipated Men's T20 World Cup in Australia next year. On the 29th of January, the International Cricket Council released to the cricket world fixtures for the matches. West Indies are to play in the hard-hitting Group 1 alongside the likes of world number 1 side Pakistan, powerhouse Australia, and 2 yet-to-be-determined qualifying teams. In Group 2, India, England, South Africa, and Phil Simmons' Afghanistan all lay waiting along with 2 other teams from the qualifiers. 12 teams are to lash it out in the Super 12 first round, with the 8 automatic qualifiers joined by 4 teams from the qualifiers. The tournament will run from October 24th to November 15, 2020, in 8 cities and 13 venues, and the magnificent Melbourne Cricket Ground will be staging the grand final. West Indies take on the Black Caps in Melbourne on October 25th, before clashing with the hosts in Perth 3 days later. The 2-time champions then take on one of the qualifying teams in Perth on October 29th, then to face off with Pakistan on November 3rd. Meanwhile, the women's tournament is set to be staged again as a standalone event. It will be held in Australia early in 2020, from February 21st to March 8th, with the final slated for International Women's Day. For the Hgp Sport, I am Stanford Howard.
And that's all we have for this edition of the Hgp Sportscast. But do remember, persistence can change failure into extraordinary achievement. Back to you, Javon.